Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the Spin It Social Hour. It is such a pleasure to be here with everyone today. My name is Stefan Kaplan, and I am a social media and visual strategist and founder of the Spin It Social Hour. Today, we are going to welcome an incredible photographer and educator by the name of Thomas Werner, and you are going to learn all about him. But first, I want to give you some details about me. So I started the Spin It Social Hour. I started the Spin It Social Hour based on a labor of love because I was really concerned for our photographers out there when this pandemic hit. And I decided that when it hit, I was going to do something to make a difference. So I launched the Spin It Social Hour in the hope of getting their name out there more and letting everyone know more about them so that when this pandemic subsides, that they may have more exposure and you know them better. Because this has been a rough ride for everyone. And I sincerely hope that everyone out there is doing well. And I am really deeply sorry for anybody who's been affected by this pandemic, whether it's health-wise, economically, etc. It has been a very difficult road, but we will get through this together. So I have worked with the Pulitzer Prizes. I have worked with AARP. I have worked with the Jackson Charitable Foundation. And I work with Sri Srinivasan and his DigiMentors group doing live streaming and event planning around the world. But we are all grinding today in this day and age, and Spin It Social and Stefan Kaplan is always open for business. So if there's ever anything that I can do to help you with your social media needs, please hit me up and let me know. It would be a pleasure to work with you. Now, in order to keep the Spin It Social Hour running, I have a sponsor now. So I wanted to let you know about my sponsor. And my dear friend, Emilio Pardo, who's a visionary brand strategist, is now the official sponsor of the Spin It Social Hour and his new show, which I am producing and directing, called Real Talk, Live from the Barn. Let's take a quick look. Real Talk, live from the barn, with your host, Emilio Pardo, at Pardo Vision on Twitter. And this week's guest, dealing with small steps to making meaning in chaos, is Dr. Christine Whalen from the University of Madison, Wisconsin, an author, professor, and speaker. And our special guest also is Dr. John White, MD, Chief Medical Officer at WebMD. And Ann Herbster, a marketing consultant who you will love to hear her story tomorrow at 6:30 Sunday. And we hope you will join us on Facebook.com/Emilio Pardo Vision and Twitter Pardo Vision. All right. So now that we got that out of the way, it is time to give Thomas Werner the buildup that he deserves. So that is exactly what we're going to do. Thomas Werner, co-founder of Ascended Creative, is the author of The Fashion Image, known as a Bible of fashion photography. He is an editor-at-large for Irk Magazine, a Paris-based fashion and culture magazine and website, and past photography program director at Parsons School of Design, as well as former national board member and New York chapter president for the American Society of Media Photographers. Thomas helped develop the media literacy website and resource center for UNESCO, and has been an instructor at the UN Education First Summer School. He has worked with the U.S. State Department on cultural projects in Russia, where he has partnered with 32 cultural, educational, and governmental organizations to develop projects in 29 cities, including exhibitions at the Hermitage. His private collection of Russian photographs and artifacts have been exhibited internationally. Thomas currently lectures internationally on the topics of photography, fashion, innovation, and education. I hope you will join me in welcoming Thomas Werner. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, Stephen. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me this morning.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm glad you're here because I know you have been traveling a lot. And my new name for you is the Traveling Man.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm in the middle of a road trip through the national parks. So.
Oh, wow, man. Why didn't you? Come on, you could have fit me in the motorhome with the luggage.
We could have done that. Next time.
I love traveling to national parks. Oh, my God. It's one of my favorite things to do is be out in nature. So
it's been amazing.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that slideshow because as I always do with all photographers, I take a lot of pride in putting together these slideshows through curating all of your work. And I wanted to make your slideshow special in the terms of that everybody knows you for a lot of your educational work these days. A lot of people know you for your visionary strategy and founding Ascendive Creative and many other things, and a great educator who travels everywhere and is open to students everywhere. And I admire that so much. But I know you're all about just creating like I am. So I took that to heart and I went through all your work and I put that together. So what did you think?
Thanks. I appreciate it. No, it was fun to see. It is great to see. People forget photography has enabled everything I've done in life. And it's still greatest pleasure. So it was great to see. Thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. I learned so much. I learned so much about every photographer and every person I bring on this show by doing that every week, because it really is a thrill to me, having edited, which I didn't even mention in my intro, that I'm a former New York Times photo editor of 20 years. Indeed. But the thing is that it gives me great pride to do that because I learned so much about you guys, you know?
Yeah. No, it's fun to look at work. Actually, one of my favorite things.
You have done so much. I'm so in awe of so much of the work you've done, and you're such an incredible educator.
Well, thanks. That's very nice.
Oh, no problem. So we're going to get right to it here. And well, first of all, let me ask you, how have you been? How have you been dealing with the pandemic? And how's life treating you with all of this? It's been a rough road for a lot of people.
Well, actually, like for everybody, the pandemic presented a number of challenges, of course. But personally, it became an opportunity to kind of reassess and develop a few things. So I launched a podcast at one point, Thomas Werner Projects Podcast. That's out. We've interviewed Eleanor Crucci and who else? Miriam Santos, who's photographed David Bowie and a number of artists and other things. So we launched the podcast. And then as an educator, I realized the world has become flat in a lot of ways, and higher education has become challenged.
Yeah.
So I started to do a little bit of consulting, and more consulting began to come in from around the world, which was a really wonderful surprise. And a former TA of mine and I started to talk about how we could work and run classes in India. She ended up getting a job developing social media for a large fashion conglomerate in India.
Oh.
And so I moved forward with Ascended. And it was originally just going to be a platform to kind of provide educational opportunities. And it grew rather exponentially very quickly. So the pandemic actually has provided a time of real growth for me and a chance to reconsider. And there are things you can do now that you couldn't do 6 months ago or 9 months ago.
You know, it's so true. The whole Spin It Social Hour thing was founded based on my passion for social media and photography. But what it really did was it gave me the opportunity to move forward with something I've always wanted to do, which was broadcasting. And I really see live streaming, as we talked about a couple of times. And, if I wanted people to know, I recently met Thomas back in January. For the first time through a friend of ours in common, a great photographer named Aaron Lee Feynman, who is a freelancer for the New York Times and many other places, and his beautiful wife, Nicole, who works at the New York Times. And I think Nicole is still there. I believe she is. But anyway, it was a pleasure meeting you because we've talked about this. And I really view live streaming as the natural evolution of social media, because it helps to amplify social media, and social media in turn amplifies the live streaming. So I think social media was hitting a bit of getting a little bit stale in certain ways, beyond TikTok, beyond this, beyond that. And I think live streaming has enabled people to really, if they have it in them, to get out there more now with their voice, you know?
People are looking for new forms of entertainment, new ways to learn, right. People engaging online, of course, and listening to live stream in ways they weren't before. So I think you're right on.
So the Thomas Werner Projects Podcast, tell us about it. And also, so for example, why did you go to podcast route and not necessarily the live streaming route? That's a pretty, good question for the moment, considering what we were just talking about.
What we're talking about. Well, I decided to podcast because I'd been recording so I'm writing a book for Routledge Press on the business of fine art photography or fine art photography. Okay. And the manuscript is almost done. That'll be in and the book will be out. We'll announce that when Routledge is ready. But so part of that process, I was videotaping interviews with artists. Mm-hmm. And I will use some of those clips when the book is launched, right? Right. When I started to think about live streaming, I thought the location I was in, the quality of the light, et cetera, wasn't quite what I wanted. It didn't match the studio style light that I had for the other work. So podcast made sense. And it was also really difficult to interview people. You do a great job with the live stream, but to interview people long distance, particularly over Zoom in the beginning when it was glitchy, and have the kind of quality I wanted. So podcast made sense. It did mean needing to learn the editing software, which was absolutely brutal. And I think it's been a really wonderful learning experience in terms of how I interview, in terms, like you say, of learning people's career. And I've had access to an extraordinary group of people. I drop one every 3 weeks, which I think is a good pace for me, given the other work. And
I think that's the important thing, is figuring out our pace when it comes to doing these things, because I don't think people realize how much work and the time that it takes to put together a weekly show. It's a lot. The
interview is the easy part of the podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's two people talking, right?
And editing, and the rest of it's the work. This is
right.
The good
and live streaming with this beautiful platform, StreamYard, that I've fallen in love with here. I love StreamYard, and I'm a big advocate of it now. Is that the beauty of it is being able to put together these multimedia presentations, and also feed it to Facebook. And we have people chiming in. Stefan, hello, Stefan Falke, wonderful photographer. Stefan, correct?
I do indeed.
Yeah, and he's going to be a future guest, by the way. We have a very special secret project we're working on.
All right.
I'll clue you in, though, behind the scenes.
All right.
And then we saw Tim Sohn chiming in. Tim says hello to you and everybody. And Pradnya Haldipur from Silver Springs, Maryland. And a bunch of other people. So welcome, everybody, to the Spin It Social Hour with my guest today and my friend, Thomas Werner. I am in awe of all the work that Thomas has done and all the travels. So I'm looking forward to continuing this for the next hour and really digging deep into his background and letting you learn all about him and his amazing educational experience, so you can take advantage of it too with him, because he has so many projects. But first, let me ask everybody, please, if you're watching, make sure you share this broadcast with your friends, with your family, even with your frenemies, okay? Make sure you share it with everybody, because we want Thomas to get out there and we want everybody to know about him, because he is a really great, great educator and photographer. So moving on now with the show. Thomas, how did you get started? How did you get, by the way, you have a great voice on the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
You have a great voice.
Thanks. Well, I did a podcast with some folks in Detroit, a fashion podcast, Fashioncast podcast. They deserve a little plug. And they're really wonderful people. And they kind of opened the door to me to considering podcasts.
Yeah,
you should do this. Yeah, and so why not? Again, what I've learned during the pandemic is, why not? There are a lot of things you can do. Some things will work, some things won't, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
You need to be producing things.
No, absolutely.
So how did I get started? I'm sorry. You were starting to say, how did you get started?
at what age and if, at what age and when did the photography bug bite you, and when did you fall in love with photography, and how did you develop your career in photography?
I didn't start taking pictures until I was in college. And my best friend, Todd Lundeen, we used to go on a lot of motorcycle trips together. Mm-hmm. And we would go up into Canada and around the West. And he said, you really need to have a camera. So I bought a camera, and we started to take pictures on the trips, and I fell in love with it. It was amazing, but never imagined it as a career. Right. It wasn't until I went to Los Angeles and got a job in casting. Actually, went to Los Angeles, ended up with a job. My first job after my degree was very glamorous. I was wearing polyester pants and a Dickies, saying, would you like butter on your popcorn? Yeah. But it turned out to be in a theater that did movie premieres, unbeknownst to me. So I met some friends, and turned out they were in casting, and I got a job casting, bit parts and music videos and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I went back to Wisconsin to bring my motorcycle out and did a lot of pictures, and walked into a lab, and they said, oh my gosh, we love these. Can we put them on the wall? Can we put them here? And I was very naive. Naivete has played a huge role in my career. Naivete and beautiful accidents, really lucky mistakes, have shaped my entire life.
I like that. Beautiful accidents. I like that. That.
They really have been. And so they put the pictures up. I was naive. I quit my job at the casting agency and started working as a photographer. So then the work was harder than I knew how to do. So I had a degree from University of Wisconsin. I went back to Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena, and started taking courses there. So I was running a business full time, a photo business, while I was in school. Mm. Yeah. And then years later, I mean, amazingly enough, I wish I, knew the gallery back then. I apologize for not knowing it, considering I used to gallery hop. You were the founder of your own gallery. I was. Another happy, beautiful accident. I'd been going back and forth from LA to New York, and I had a space that I'd been sharing in the Chelsea Arts building on 526 West 26th Street, and took over the space as a studio, and had been shooting there. And then 9/11 occurred, and 9/11 actually changed my career in substantive ways. Wow. And yours, well, I know. And so I had a job for Crevassier in October, and then I didn't have anything. And as you know, a lot of the larger photographers were taking the work we had at the next level down because they didn't have any work either. The ones that stayed in New York didn't go to Europe. So I'd helped curate a collection for Swiss Re. Swiss Re had built out the top 6 floors of the Helmsley building, and I was an assistant curator on that, art curator. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I've got this space. There are a lot of galleries at 526. I'll open up a gallery. So I put friends' work up, and people came in. I thought, all right, why not? And I went to one of the directors of Paul Kasman Gallery, a big gallery in New York, and said to her, hey, I think I'm going to open a gallery. And she said, you can't do that. You don't have an art history degree. You've never worked at a gallery. And I said, well, open.
That is such a typical answer from other people in the field, that way, you don't have an art history degree. You don't have this and that, sometimes you have to go for it and go with what you know, and you can create something new and great.
Look, I never would have opened the gallery. I never would have worked in Russia. I never would have done any other things. Right. Most of the things I've done if I'd followed those rules or listened to people tell me I couldn't. Right. Even as an exhibiting artist, the work that I ended up exhibiting and was written up in the New Yorker at one point. I was the pick of the week and then a review, for 4 weeks. When I was at Art Center, I had professors, they looked at that work and they said, oh, that's really great. That's nice. But why don't you just put that in a drawer for yourself and don't show it to anybody? And a gallerist in New York saw it, well, what would it have been 6 years later? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, you have to exhibit this. So there's a balance between who you learn from and how much you listen to them. And certainly a balance between what you try and the people who tell you can't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
I was just going to say naivete. I had no idea how much work it was going to be to open a gallery. And it is absolutely the most fun and self-indulgent thing you're ever going to do. Turning a profit at a gallery is a lot of work. And that was my promise, was I would keep the gallery as long as it made a profit.
Mm-hmm.
And, after 10 years, I had a lot of other things going on, and it was time to close the space. And art fairs were coming up, which aren't my favorite thing.
Right. No, yeah. I learned a lot about the gallery scene when I first had my first couple of exhibitions and museums too. And, it's a whole nother world. So it's a very interesting world and very dynamic and very, very complex. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But, I saw this photo of the fashion image. As I said, many people consider it like the Bible of fashion photography now. I've read these things online. It's what people are saying. And must have been, it's always a thrill, I guess. You walk into the Strand or anywhere and you see your book, on display and everything. Great feeling, huh?
It was pretty amazing. I went into the Strand, I don't know, this was probably 5 or 6 weeks after the book was out, and asked, I just want to see it on the shelf. And asked where it was. And the guy said, no, it's on the table. And I never expected it to be featured. It was a great feeling. My mom read voraciously, and she would have been thrilled that I'd written a book. This too happened by accident. I got an email that said, hey, we're looking for somebody to write a book on fashion. Mm-hmm. You have an idea, or do you know someone who does? Mm-hmm. And I had a meeting with the editor from Bloomsbury Publishing. The book is by Bloomsbury Publishing in London. Right. And she came in and we had coffee, and I gave her 3 ideas. And she said, well, instead of writing 3 books, you should write the book. And well, let's put them all together. The book. And I was very naive. And I said, well, okay, sure. Yeah. Not realizing what that meant. And
so how long did it take to put the fashion image together, Thomas?
Well, you start with a proposal, particularly for your first book, and that process, you work very closely with your editor because they help shape it. Your editor really becomes your advocate. They take that pitch to the editorial board, right, who says yes or no. Right. So we worked for probably 5 months on the proposal, because it was sent out for peer review by 2 photographers in New York. I mean, not New York, in the US, and 2 in the UK. Okay. And then once it's okayed, then the first book goes through 4 peer reviews. The next book will go through 1, so it'll be much different. Mm-hmm. And the writing of the book took about 1.5 years, a little bit longer. And actually licensing the images for the fashion image was tough because, we have some images from the Avedon Foundation, and we have a couple of images from other photographers that are quite well known. Actually, Inez and Vanud and Mario Sorrente, Kate Moss, Giselle all donated work to the book. Wow. Because it was an educational book.
Wow. And that's great.
Many thanks to them and other people who donated. Some people donated work to the project because textbooks don't have huge budgets. Right. And, I want to give the author or the photographer, let me say. So, so I felt very lucky, but the licensing took a long time because we had to go through some agencies, some of which, like the Avedon Foundation, was extraordinarily gracious, and others who made me negotiate for 1.5 months or more.
I wanted to give a big shout out to Ron Thomas of Strategy Focus Group out of Dubai. Ron is watching from Dubai, so he's based in Dubai, and he's a wonderful HR expert. There he is, Ron Thomas, and he's just doing so much overseas. And I met him last year and became friends, and he's an incredible photographer too. He walks around Dubai early in the mornings on his walks to stay in shape, and he takes a lot of great photos in Dubai right now. Anyway, greetings, Ron, and greetings to everybody else joining us for the Spin It Social Hour here with Thomas Werner, author of The Fashion Image, and we're looking at some of the work right here. Thomas, beautiful work in this book.
And it isn't, and I should say, all the work isn't in the book is not mine, not remotely, and that was an important choice. Right. I felt, because I didn't think it should be a book about me. I also, one of the conversations with the publishing company, and for people looking to publish, certainly photo textbooks and that kind of thing, I think is important, is early on I made the distinction that this is a photo book with 80,000 words of text, not 80,000 words of text illustrated by photos. Mm-hmm. So the photos had to be primary, and they had to be forward, and they had to, I thought, carry the day. Mm-hmm. And that was a long conversation actually with the publisher. We had to talk about that and the designer a few times because it's a very different way of looking at a textbook, as it were. And we removed a lot of the things that make it feel like a textbook because I wanted it to be interesting and accessible to students, but also interesting to career changers and people in the field. And I do think we've achieved that. I mean, I really do. I think the book I'm pleased.
Right. No, well, that's why one of the things I made sure of is that in the opening slideshow, where people want to go back and watch it on replay, all of those photos in the opening slideshow are yours. Be sure to specifically curate the opening slideshow based on your work. And then when we got into the slideshow here, the multimedia presentation of the book, I wanted to make sure that there was a clear-cut division between that work and a lot of the work that isn't yours, because, I want everybody to have their fair share of play, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes in terms of rights and stuff like that. So, but anyway, you have some great quotes in the book too, like this one from Mario Sorrenti, learn from a defeat and be able to come back with the answers. I mean, I was thinking about that last night, and it's so true.
Mario's one of actually the most decent and introspective people and well prepared. He still at this point researches the audience of every one of his clients in the magazines and really is very humble in terms of his success. And I thought this quote was interesting too, because he believes in coming back with the answers. And and even now he has things that don't work out. He was gracious enough to join me for the book launch at Parsons. We had 450 people in the auditorium and another 300 actually who were on the list. And he was very open about the fact that there are certain magazines that his work just doesn't fit in. And one student asked, why don't you shoot more for American Vogue? And he laughed and he said, I don't know. That's a great question. So we all have our place, even the most talented people. And he's extraordinarily humble and transparent about his successes and his challenges. I thought that was amazing.
It's so great when you have somebody of that caliber who is willing to lend great insight, share the experience, but yet be so humble and also, down to earth with their approach towards people they work with and new people that they meet. Because, it's just, that's how life should be. It shouldn't be the other way where there's all this other nonsense that goes on. But I threw this photo in here, by the way, for a very well-known photographer for the Wires, a good friend of mine who was actually my first guest on this show. And this is by the way, folks, this is the 25th Spin It Social Hour. I didn't make as big of a deal as I did online about it when we opened today. But it's pretty cool, and I'm pretty happy. And, I've gotten a lot of great feedback from all the photographers that have been on. And it's a pleasure to have Thomas on here as the 25th guest. So I picked this photo because Nick Curry, who's in Monterey and doing amazing and very dangerous work with the wildfires out there for the Wires, raises chickens. So I threw this photo in there because, Nick, this one's for you, buddy. So a prime fashion photo with some beautiful chickens. And Nick has a chicken that looks just like that.
You can't have too many chickens. And Paul Gilbrick is the photographer. I should give him a shout out.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. So this is a beautiful photo. I mean, I love the setting. I love the whole concept. And, all of these photos in the book are just so gorgeous.
The picture on the right actually is mine. Okay. That was a fashion shoot we did at the 10 Bells pub in London. It was the pub where Jack the Ripper's last victims were last seen. And it was closed and we were going to tear it down. And we were able to get in and shoot before they destroyed the pub.
Wow.
It was an amazing day. Yeah, it was a great day.
Wow. So what did it feel like walking around a pub that you knew Jack the Ripper was like?
It was a little intense. It was seeped, but I love those moments. That's what we do. It's seeped, And
no doubt. I mean, it's a really great photo, and the quality of fashion imagery among some of the best out there, and even others, always amazes me, because you have to be so on point with fashion photography for the quality, for the galleries, for the magazines, for the exhibitions, you name it. And I worked for years at the New York Times, as everybody knows, and I worked with some of the greatest ones, including Bill Cunningham, who was, if anybody doesn't know Bill Cunningham, please Google Bill Cunningham and go see the documentary based on his life, which is an amazing documentary, and learn all about Bill, because one of the great photographers out there, and not just a fashion photographer, as Bill always, said, because Bill documented life. It wasn't just fashion. Fashion is life, and life is fashion, right?
It's true. Hey, and I do want to say, sorry, I'm not giving props to everybody, but the image on the left is by a collaborative called French Cowboy out of Paris, and me and Julian are also the editors who started Irk Magazine, the magazine that I write for and work as an editor at large. Mm-hmm. So they're another example of people who are amazing image makers. Julian designs graphic design and product design for Prada and leading brands in Paris. And then they've also started this fashion print and web publication. So I want to give them a little shout out too.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to ask you, so here's a question for you, Thomas. What is the difference between a normal fashion photograph and one that becomes iconic, in your opinion? And what do you look for to make that decision as somebody in this business that's very well regarded?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. First, it needs to be technically sound, and it needs to speak both technically, stylistically, and content-wise to the time in which it's created. So really great fashion images, looking back, become arbiters of the time in which they were made. They become kind of definitions of that era. So if I say the 1960s or the 1990s, you get a vision in your head, but frequently that vision includes the fashion of the times. Mm-hmm. And I think a great iconic fashion image captures the essence of that moment and who we were socially, morally, economically, subculture, right? If you think of times like punk versus disco, they both images of both those forms of fashion defined who we were at the time, right? Yeah. People punk were rebelling, against what was deteriorating New York and London and lack of jobs, and people in disco celebrating indulgence and acceptance, really. I think people forget that places like Studio 54 and in the late 70s, ideas of sexuality were very broadly accepted and openly discussed. David Bowie was gender fluid. He slept with Mick Jagger, who was with Bianca, who was with, right? And so this topic changed. Of course, the conversation changed with the advent of AIDS. But I think it's important to look at different eras and understand how the photograph defines it. And then, there are a lot of great photographs that don't get visibility and traction. Mm-hmm. So,
it's true.
Visibility, right? You can create an iconic photograph that doesn't become iconic because it doesn't get the visibility it deserves.
Well, right. And you need to know how to get your work out there. And that's one of the things that we're going to get into in terms of your experience and your expertise. By the way, I have a great friend I grew up with, roller disco skating. And by the way, I worked at Studio 54 for 2 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a bus boy.
I love it.
I worked at Studio 54 2 summers in a row while I was in college. And, man, if only I had a camera in my hands back then, man. And they're very lucky that smartphones didn't exist back then.
Oh, well, but that allowed a lot of life to happen.
Yes, it did. And I got to see it all. It's an experience there, and working at the Paradise Garage for a summer. And I actually have my club membership card to prove it. 2 places with amazing sound systems, but also, wow, man, life. What an experience that was.
Unfiltered.
unfiltered with fashion and sexuality and you name it. It was amazing to to bear a witness. I almost said to be a part of.
Well, we won't go there. Yeah, we won't talk about the role you played, but we will.
Let's stop right.
I heard stories, but it was, that was an amazing moment, and I think people forget you had fashion, art, music, literature, everybody, really, film. Everybody came together at a place like Studio 54, and also collaboratively.
Yeah.
Right. It was a moment of extraordinary collaboration, and I think prior to that, it was probably the Dadists, surrealists, the fashion designers, the movie makers, the Stieglitzes, and then I think you're in that moment now, and I don't think that young image makers understand that you have the chance now to work in. You can write, you can create film, you can curate, you can shoot, you can be a photo editor. Elizabeth Renstrom at the New Yorker is a great example. She's published a photo book. She shoots. She's a photo editor. She was the editor at Vice.
Yeah.
She's a great example of somebody who's breaking those contemporary boundaries. So if you're listening and you're creative, take advantage of all these things. It's a moment where those things are celebrated, and that won't last forever. It never does.
Wow. See, that is the advice that I wanted to bring you on for, because and you have the experience and the wisdom to teach everybody and tell everybody out there through the Spin It Social Hour. And I'm a big advocate of that. Right now is, with everything that's going on, even there's opportunity to create and learn from and just go to and take your work and your thought process and ideas to a new level, a new dimension,
Yeah, I think part of it's letting go of past constructs, and not that ways that photography or, video or reaching audiences is going to change. I don't think, television's going away. I don't think magazines are going away completely.
I hope not.
But you have the opportunity, though, to, if you're willing to adjust or be flexible or create and innovate a little bit, to engage the world in new ways.
Absolutely. Our friend Stella Kramer, who Stella, who was a colleague of mine at the New York Times and was actually part of the Pulitzer Prize winning team on the Portraits of Grief book. And we were on a show last week with Sri Srinivasan, recounting our stories about 9/11. And Stella just launched a wonderful new magazine called Stellazine. And the wonderful part about it is that she's really finding work that just has not gotten to play out there, and she's going to start putting it out there that way. And people can subscribe to it at Stellazine. That's Stella and Zine. So Google it. Anyway, one of the things I want to say was I had a friend. Have you ever heard of Bobby Miller? He did a book on Studio 54. There's a lot of photographers out there, so it's possible that you haven't. But yeah, Bobby Miller, I interviewed Bobby. He was in around guest number 15. And he was an old roller disco friend of mine. He had cameras in his hands everywhere he went back in the days, and got some amazing fashion and other photos at Studio 54. He did a whole book on it. So
I'll take a look.
Yeah, definitely. Bobby Miller. So let me bring on somebody, a good old friend of mine who actually worked in some of the clubs with me and also is a very talented photographer. His name is John Quincy Lee. And John is a great old friend, and he does a lot of fashion work and concert work. He wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
Hi, John.
Hey, how's it going? Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, yeah. Okay. Hey, I was asking, as digital photography is taking over, and a lot of camera companies, I think they stopped making film cameras. In fashion, is everybody going to go digital eventually?
Yeah, I think so. Well, not everybody, right? The majority of people will. And the majority of people will for any number of reasons. One, a lot of shooters are shooting digital. They were raised on it. They love it. A lot of companies want a faster turnaround. They want to be able to be participatory, whether in the shoot, sitting at a video village, or in another location. They want to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. You'll have a handful of clients and a handful of photographers from time to time who can shoot film and perhaps want that look or are willing to be more indulged in terms of timeline, expense. And really, it's the time frame. And for some clients, it's trusting an image maker in a way that they don't anymore. So when everybody shot film, you had a little magic happening because the photographer could create things that not everybody was seeing, and you had really beautiful accidents that were considered after the fact, and you didn't have a team of people perhaps managing the image mid-process, which I think takes away some of the creativity, with all due respect to the amazing art directors and photo editors that are on set and creative directors. But chance, there's less chance. So yes, I do think the vast majority of work will be digital, and in rare instances, you'll be able to shoot film.
But when you talk about feel, when you look at a picture, could you tell the difference if it's film or digital these days?
I think I do think there's a difference. I think there are some images you can't tell. There are some images that look like transparency film that are shot digital, almost the same. Not the magic on the light box, but they feel the same because of the crisp edge and the color. But you can do some amazing black and white work, or you can do some amazing color work with, I think, very different grain structure than you get digitally. And the edges are a little softer, and the feel, there's a depth to that silver. So I do think there's a difference. Not always. You can't always tell. But if you do a spread in film, or that's what you shoot consistently, I think there's a different vibe to your work. And let's face it, you're probably more considered if you're shooting a roll of 10 frames or 36. You're going to be more considered with each image, and that changes the look.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, everybody, look up John Quincy Lee. That's Quincy Lee. John Quincy Lee. Check him out on Instagram. John, thanks so much, man. It's so great seeing you, man. We got to catch up. Social distancing wise or not, I miss you, man.
You got it. I got a picture of you right behind my shoulder here.
Is that me with the big S on his chest?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Not this guy, but this guy.
Those are the Studio 54 days, right? That's that was.
Actually, there's the Roxy days. Keith Haring.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
John Lee was.
Stefan was there.
Yeah, John was.
I used to hang out
with the Roxy back in the days, and we had some great times. All right, John.
Okay.
All right, take care, buddy. See you later. Thank you. Okay,
bye.
Bye-bye. So John's a really, really solid photographer, and he's always working. So he wanted to come on, and I appreciate it. Yes. So there's Stefan promoting Stella Zine. There you go. I love it when people share. So let's see. One of the things I wanted to also ask you was, we have it right here. What is the most important advice, Thomas, that you would give young photographers out there today? Well, I know that's a loaded question.
One is, I don't think the business is as difficult as everybody's going to tell you.
Okay.
I think that people who are just starting out understand the consumption of imagery across multiple media platforms and internationally in a way that a lot of photographers who've been in the business a long time don't. And with all due respect to many of my colleagues, they don't approach it in the same way. Young image makers are used to working in video and still and creating for Instagram and creating for print, and they don't think anything of it. They understand the platforms and they understand the language. So I would say embrace that. I would also say, as many people would, embrace your creativity. Don't let fear rule your choices. I think fear is absolutely one of the great destroyers of great artists and great artwork, and keep people from making the things they can make. Listen to advice, but trust yourself. And you need to work harder than you will ever imagine. And the things your mom taught you or should have, that you need to work hard. When I was shooting fashion, I work 7 days a week anyway. I love what I do, but it's a 7 day a week, 6 day a week gig.
Right.
You need to be deeply referenced, not just fashion. You need to understand design, fashion design, photography, great film. You need references. So work hard, reference deeply, and work fearlessly.
Okay. The great advice and insight. Thank you for sharing that. So as we're going to go through a bunch of slides here, because you have done so much, I need 3 hours to interview you. But we're going to make it all fit up to the 11 hour, which is usually what I go to, because it's never the bodies of work that photographers that I bring on here is so important and so great that I never rush, and I always make sure I get it all in. So as we go through this, though, I'm going to let you talk a little as I show a bunch of these rather than get into details of each one, or else we'd be here till next year. Do you help? A lot of these are promotional posters and other things for a lot of the lectures you've given around the world, from China to Russia, and things you've curated and other things. Do you help design these yourself? Is it a partnership? And as I scroll through this, if you want to give a really great, summary of a lot of the work, some of the work you've done, please just roll with it.
I didn't have anything to do with the posters designed in China.
Okay.
This was actually just prior to COVID in November of last year. Mm-hmm. And I did 2 gigs in China. The first one was 12 lectures in 6 cities in 7 days. Mm. And I spoke at individual art schools, private art schools, and a series of universities. Yeah, this is great. They had these giant posters on the wall, one in English and one in Chinese. The audiences were wonderful. I spoke on fashion and the fashion image, which was really nice. The folks in China were really gracious, and I enjoyed it.
You're a rock star, man.
It was fun. It is fun. Working in China, I think, provides a lot of opportunities. People don't begin. I think you can work internationally almost as easily as you can work nationally.
Okay. Okay.
The next poster, the one on the left, Soviet Life, Russian Reality. I have either the largest or second largest private collection of original Russian historical photography in the country.
Wow.
And a lot of it never published. And this was a poster for an exhibition done at a museum in Minneapolis, a Russian museum. Mm-hmm. My work was in 2 of those exhibitions, one of which we had a floor. I have to say the quick story. As a little kid in the Milwaukee Art Museum, there's a wing where the work was all donated by a family. And I would see from the collection I remember being like, the tag was right here and looking up at it. And I thought that was so amazing. So we had this exhibition with a really gracious and talented collector in Minneapolis. And I had to give an artist talk upstairs in the main gallery. And I asked to go to the bathroom, went downstairs, and I stood for a minute in front of those tags that said from the collection of Thomas Werner. And 10-year-old me was just so happy because it was something that I'd always wanted to do. So it was a real gift. And I love the work. I started collecting it because it was being destroyed. People didn't view photography from that era as artwork.
Well, that is fascinating to find out. I know a lot about a lot of the work that you've done, as we talked about. I've done my research, but I did not know that you had the largest collection of second largest.
Probably the second largest in the States. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
1900 pieces.
Wow. And, the other thing that I really admire, Thomas, about you is that you're the consummate educator, So, everything that you do, in my opinion, from my observing all of this and learning so much about you, is you're always about educating. And I saw that, you always incorporate some way, you always find a way to incorporate students and student bodies into what you're doing abroad and here.
Yeah,
like this, where, people were able to participate in this other project, and you had a beautiful poster design for it and everything. This is a stunning advertisement here for